Let me get a sip of water here. Roger Ram arrived in 1990 in Goa, and we met right away and became instant best friends. And we were both living in this village, Anjuna, one of the famous Goa villages and party places. And we became best friends, and we started going to all the parties together, tripping and having a fantastic time and watching. And all through, we said, "Wow, we really feel like we could make this music. We understand this music, but we don't know anything about computers, technology, synthesizers. How will we do it?" That went on for years, talking like that. We also said, "Wouldn't it be fun to be DJs? Oh, I think we could do that, but we don't know how to mix or anything technical." So finally, in 1999, we had known Rick Tum and Bunzy from GMS since they were 15 years old in Amsterdam, and then they went up very fast in mid 90s, became superstars, and had GMS was at the top, and but we knew them and they were friends of ours. We said, "Well, let's ask them if maybe they could make another band, if they'd be interested." And they said, "Sure, let's try it." So we made our very first track, which was, I remember the very, very first time I smoked DMT, if you remember that track. That's Terence McKenna. This guy was just talking about all the psychoactives, and Terence McKenna is probably the number one most sampled person in the trance world. I mean, you've heard a million, and he talks like this. He's got this American accent. Even in that sample, he says, "I remember the very, very first time I smoked." And The Matrix had just come out. And so we used some samples from The Matrix, which were killer. And a funny part of it is that track, we call it DMT or the blue pill. You take the blue pill, if anybody remembers that. But we completely fucked up because the sample goes, you take the blue pill and you stay normal, pretty normal. But you take the red pill and you go into Wonderland, and I'll show you how deep the rabbit hole goes, how wow you can go. So the point is, you should have taken the red pill, but we were stoned. We're the only band, by the way, that I know that takes acid every track we make. We do. I have to tell you the story of how we got the name also, because it's pretty amazing. So yeah, it should have been the red pill, but we called it the blue pill. Is even the name on the thing. And then afterwards, we said, "What are we thinking? It should have been the red pill." Anyway, it was a big hit. And in Goa, they have this one club, the Nine Bar, and there's a different DJ every night. And some people went every night for their therapy and their dancing and exercise. And every DJ played this track every night. It was a huge hit. So we thought, wow, well, that was pretty far out. Maybe we should make a whole album. And Roger Ram got this amazing, one of the killer ideas of all time. He said, why should we? He was tripping, actually, swinging in a hammock in Brazil. And he's on LSD, and he says, oh, man, want to make an album. Why should we name every track just any name, Fly Me to the Moon or whatever you hear? We believe in what's near and dear to all of us, our music and our dancing and our drugs. But we believe in consciousness expansion, opening the mind. All these drugs are doorways to other dimensions that you can't experience in your normal five senses. So why don't we make a whole album about each different mind-expanding drugs? So we had LSD and salvia divinorum and hashish and marijuana and ecstasy and mescaline and that also became a huge hit, and everybody loved that idea, of course, in our crowd. And the music was very interesting, something very different that nobody had heard before. And I must say also that GMS, when they started, they also were something completely different. They had new musical ideas that nobody had explored before, and that's partly why they took off, and were so big. So that started really happening, and at the same time, Rajaram and I both went to Brazil, and there was from about 1998 to 2003. It only lasted for about 5 years. There was an amazing killer scene like this in Brazil happening up in the north of Bahia at the beaches. And I show up and there's this 3-day party going on. The guy says, Chicago, man, can you DJ for us? And I said, no, I actually happen to have some quite good new music, but I don't know how to DJ. He said, never mind, just put on the music. People will forgive you if you don't know how to mix. If the music is good, it will go. Well, I had stayed 1 year home from Goa the whole winter, and I went with Rick, Tom, and Bunzy in their studio every night. It was 900 mics then. Well, we didn't call it that. We didn't know about the band yet. It was the three of us, and we made 18 different tracks, some with Zorba, if any of you know Zorba. It was Zorba featuring Chicago, and a whole lot of tracks, GMS featuring Chicago, and many of them were released on T.I.P Records. So we did that, and I show up in Brazil with all this new music, and nobody had heard that, and it was quite special music. So I started DJing, and everybody really liked it, even though I didn't know how to mix. And the same thing happened to Roger Ram. He was at a party. I wasn't there at that one. And the DJ passed out from too much drugs. Just couldn't do it anymore. And so they go, Roger Ram, can you save us, man? Help us out. And he says, I don't know how to DJ. I have music with me. And they said, don't worry, just your T.I.P Records and put something on. So he started playing. People really liked it. And it just took off for both of us. But going back to Roger Ram, in also 1990, he first came to Goa, and he had a band called The Infinity Project. I don't know if any of you ever heard of that music, but it was quite killer music, and they were one of the big bands of the early 90s. And T.I.P Records, T.I.P Records, is for that band, The Infinity Project, T.I.P. That's how that came about. So he was in this big band, and it was going great. And then he decided, why not open a record label? And he opened T.I.P Records, and that became massive. And probably many of you have been, it's been part of your lives. T.I.P releases have been killer releases, great music all through the years. So we were partying in Goa. He had the band. He opened T.I.P Records. Everything was going great. Oh, yeah, I was going to tell you how we got the name of the band. So we made the first album. We're trying, okay, now we need to name the band. What are we going to call ourselves? Had a lot of list of names. And then when we made that first album, the Drugs album, we wanted to take drops and see if that helped us with creativity and to make it. So this friend of ours gave us this bottle of drops, but they were really weak. So we took drops, and then we weren't really getting where we wanted to be, and we took more drops, and then we went on for 10 days. We made this whole album, and taking these drops all along. So afterwards, we finished the album. We go home to my house in Ibiza, in Rick, Tom, and Bunzy's studio we had been, and we're having a bowl of cereal, and Roger Ram went to take a bite of cereal, and a bee had landed on his spoon and stung him in the middle of the tongue. Yeah, so he says, oh, Chicago, man, I'm dying here. It's like somebody stabbed a dagger through my tongue, and this bee stung me. And I said, oh, my God, let me have a look. So I look, and there's the stinger. I say, we got to get the stinger out. It has the poison in it. So I go run and get my tweezers. And I say, now hold still, open your, stick your tongue out. And I'm going, and his tongue is going like this, And I say, hold still, man. I'm trying to get this thing. And he said, I can't. I'm so nervous. And this thing is killing me. So I get the stinger out, and then I run in, and I had a medical book. I get the book, and it says in capital letters, this is a medical emergency. Proceed immediately to a doctor or the emergency room of a hospital because you can swell up, have an allergic reaction, and die. People do. So I'm telling you this. So he's telling this story afterwards to a friend, and he's saying, so there I am on 1,200 mics from the build-up through the year. Some people think he took 1,200 mics. That's not true. It was a build-up through the whole 10 days. He's telling this guy, so here I am on 1,200 mics, and I hate doctors, and I hate emergencies room. I'm completely scared of them, and Chicago's telling me, this is a medical emergency. We have to go, man. And I can't. I said, no, I'm not going to do it. So we got him breathing. We get him rescue remedy and did what we could, and then he laid there spacing out, tripping, stinging from this terrible sting also. But slowly, he came out of it, and that night there was a big trance party. We took more acid and went out and danced all night and had a great time. But anyway, this guy he told the story to said, you're looking for a name. That could be a great name, 1,200 micrograms. So that's how it came about, Funny story, huh? In the 80s in Goa, it was an amazing scene. First of all, there was much more colorful and picturesque, and because there was no drug laws, there was just drug action happening everywhere. And I'd like to say also that they interview us all the time, and they say you made a drugs album and tell us about drugs, and we always say consciousness expansion and all of that. But we never mentioned the truth that drugs are fucking fun. That we have a great time. And you look, all these people are blasting on drugs. I love these festivals because they're just a wild, mad drug party in a good way. You know, we want to get high and have fun, and we do. Occasionally, people do too much, take the wrong things or whatever, and that can be a problem. But most people are just having a really good time together, want to dance and have fun with their friends. And so this was going on in Goa. You could smoke chillums and take acid, and there was people were tripping on the beach. And in the 80s, people were naked or topless all the time on the beach. There was this mad scene, and chillum smoking all day long, and it was really amazing. And then the parties every 2 or 3 days. And there was a whole group of people then. They were living down on the beach under these pandanus trees, and they made a whole community, like a commune down at the beach that went on for years. And they made T-shirts, hand-printed T-shirts, and had kids around. I mean, it was a real funny scene, and many of them made outfits, costumes for every single party. That was part of their passion, and it was really funny, all these colorful people around. And then we had something that I call the speaker family. And for years, we had a gang of friends who went every party. Okay, here we are 3 days later. Here we go again. Let's blast. Take the acid. And off we went. So we danced together for years. The speaker family, very special experience, very powerful. And if you go in here and dance, you see the camaraderie of the dance floor. There's something special, a magic that happens. Music, we say, is the soundtrack of all of our lives. Movies have their soundtracks, and each of us has our own soundtrack of our lives. The music that has been important to us through everything, through our sad times, through our happy times, through our blasting times. Uh, and Where was I? Spacing out. Here we go. uh, Yeah, so these people were making then, and then in the late 80s in Ibiza also, you may have heard about the Summer of Love and all the ecstasy. And interestingly, Osho Rajneesh, if you know that guru from India, a lot of people were his followers, and they were the first ones to get a hold of all the ecstasy. And they had some producers who were making zillions of tabs, and these sannyasins were taking it all over the planet and making millions of dollars. And was an amazing scene. And they took it to Ibiza, and everybody, for the first time in like 1986, 87, started taking and going to these clubs. And I don't know if you heard, but in Ibiza they have these open, and they at that time all the clubs were open air under the moon and the stars, and everybody started taking ecstasy. There was no MDMA crystal yet, but ecstasy pills, and it revolutionized everything. Everybody started having love feelings, and the dance floor became very fantastic. And at that time also, we know some friends who were in the London club scene, and up to that time, they were wearing like velvet suits and really dressy, fancy things. And suddenly, this new ecstasy, and they started making clubwear, which were spandex tights and colorful things, and everybody switched over to that. And in 1987, these DJs, some of the famous England DJs came, got into that scene for the whole summer, and then they took it back to London and introduced that scene into the whole London story. Everybody changed, and all kinds of tough guys were taking ecstasy and on the dance floor hugging each other. It was very funny. So that was going on, and also in Ibiza, and Space Tribe came in then. Ollie Wisdom from Space Tribe, he and his sister and his brother Mikey and a whole bunch of them were in a circus crew, and they dressed completely like circus, and they did juggling of all kinds, and they did performances and stuff. And they showed up like in 1988 in Goa and started making all this new kind of weird stuff that was happening and dressing really wild. And Space Tribe clothing, we all know. So Ali was the first one wearing all of that, and everybody's going, what the fuck? But it caught on. Everybody started wearing that stuff, and then it was happening all over the world. And then Tip Records also started printing T-shirts, and you could go to trance events all over the planet and see Space Tribe. And you can still, they still are here at every festival, and you still see people wearing those clothes. And this is a Tip T-shirt. Tip T-shirts as well. Um, so let's see, where should I go now? I'm trying to think. Anybody have any questions at this point? If you have any questions at any point, you want to ask? Nobody think of anything. What? Go on. Come in here. Come in here. What? The origins of the hippie movement, or yeah, right. Uh huh. Right. Well, we always thought the same thing. I'm American from Chicago. And during those years in the 80s and 90s, we were blasting. And now people don't play so much trance music all the time. But at that time, everybody, all of us were playing music day and night, trance music, restaurants, wherever you went, the cars, there was trance music blasting all over the place. And we thought it can only be a matter of time before it just catches on and becomes commercial, that everybody will get into this, understand, feel this music, and get into it, and in America. And it just didn't happen. America still to this day is a rock and pop and hip hop, and now they've gotten into EDM, club music, dance music, but not to trance music. And we don't really understand, but all through these years, they have little tiny pockets of trance party. Goa Gil lives in San Francisco, and he makes a couple of parties in Northern California every year, but it just didn't happen. But anyway, that's a good question. Going back to the late 60s, actually, I was in university from 64 to 68. And I was in a fraternity where all these guys, all the girls are in sororities, like 70, 80 girls living together in a house, and we were in fraternities, and it was quite a wild scene. Uh, our university, at the University of Wisconsin, was one of the two states where they allowed drinking when you were 18, beer. So all the fraternities had beer parties every weekend, and that was really crazy. And it was football games and beer parties and chasing the girls and the usual stuff. And then in 1966, the first drugs came in. The first marijuana came, and at the same time, the first LSD came. And we're going, wow. And people are saying, we got this. You want to try it? And I said, yeah, I think I do. And so it became divided also in the fraternity because most of the people thought it was heroin and drugs, oh my God, this horrible thing. And some of us thought, wow, this is. I remember it was in the fraternity where there was like 8 guys in this room in very low light, and we smoked the first joints, and the walls started going like that. And I was going, wow, this is a pretty interesting world in here. So then we took, the first acid. This was an interesting one, too. I'll briefly say that my sister went off the rails completely. I'm 70 now, and she is a year younger, 69. But when we were in the middle of high school years, my parents moved to another suburb, and we didn't want to move, but they forced us, and we lost all of our friends, and we grew up in this other town. And my sister just started running wild and running with this crazy group and getting drunk. And parents were saying, your daughter was out at 4 in the morning on drugs, riding around on motorcycles with boys. And what? They sent her away to Kansas City, and she went to a girls' school where her roommate was a lesbian. And she got into lesbianism. And then she finished that. She moved in, and they insisted she go to some college. Everybody wanted their kids to go to college. She didn't want to go at all. I did, and I had a great time, but she didn't want to go. They forced her to go. She moved into this place in Vermont, and her roommate was a lesbian. So she got into a relationship with this girl, and about 6 months later, they wrote to their parents, and they said, dear Mom and Dad, fuck you. We are lesbians, we are hippies, and we hate you, and just stay away from us, kind of thing, you know. My father happened to have been a big celebrity in America. He was a football hero, a big American football star, and then he was on television as a announcer at the football game for years, every Sunday and Monday. So the whole nation knew him, and it was very embarrassing for him. He was really worried these stories are going to get out about his daughter, you know, doing all these wild things. Then it came to be Easter time. I was still in university. It was the summer of love, 1967, and my sister and her lesbian girlfriend decided they were really hippies. They were serious hippies, dirty and unwashed, wearing really crap clothes, and just went in for the whole thing. They bought a Volkswagen van and they went across from New York City all the way to San Francisco for the summer of love. On the way, they stopped in Chicago, and I came home for summer holidays. And they picked me up. She and her boyfriend from California picked me up at the airport. And the guy holds up this pill at the time. You know, it was a capsule, and he said, "This is it." And I said, "What do you mean, this is it?" And he said, "This is it, LSD." And I said, "Wow, we heard about this, but I haven't tried it yet." And he said, "Well, we're going to try it." Luckily, my parents went out of town for the weekend. And we had the house. My father had quite a good stereo system, and Jefferson Airplane, Surrealistic Pillow, and some of these really trippy albums came out. And we took the acid, and it was an amazing night. I think all of us remember our first LSD trip. This was mine. It was quite incredible. And then when the two girls arrived in their Volkswagen van, my parents were absolutely shocked because they hadn't seen them. They had said, "Don't stay away from us, don't come visit us." So they hadn't seen them, and suddenly these terrible hippies show up. Uh-oh. Whoa. And my sister says, "We are sleeping in the same bed." And my mother said, "No way, you are not sleeping in my house with a lesbian lover." And she said, "Okay, fuck you. We're going then. We're on the way to San Francisco." And she said, "Okay, okay, we love you. We want you to be here. Okay, you can sleep together." They went on to San Francisco and had the summer of love you were asking about. And this whole scene started then, the explosion. And it was an amazing time. It's impossible for any of you to imagine, but everything had been completely normal for so long, and suddenly, boom, everything exploded, and drugs were happening, and people were growing their hair and wanting to live a new way, and getting tired of American materialism being the answer to everything. You work your ass off, you make as much money to buy as many things, and that's success. But somehow it felt empty to a lot of people, and they wanted to live an alternative way, which I think most of us do also. We kind of try to live at the edge of the system, as much out of it as we can, and that was one of the ideas. And so this whole wonderful thing started happening. But unfortunately, it only lasted for about 5 years. And it was an amazing, magical 5 years. But slowly, even in San Francisco, my sister, by the way, ended up on heroin. She was living in a commune, a crash pad with all these people, all these hippies, everybody out of it. And she almost died. She was completely yellow. And finally, somebody said, "You look really yellow. Maybe you should go to the hospital." And she had hepatitis. She had been sharing needles with other people. And so my mother came and brought her home and forced her to go back into college. And she went for a little bit back in our hometown. And then she got fed up again. And she pulled the shade down and she wrote in lipstick, "Fuck you, Mom." And took off. And she called me and my wife and said, "We want to go out to San Francisco. I want to go out there. My friends are still out there." I took her in my car, put her on the highway. She stuck her thumb out, and off she went again. But anyway, this whole wonderful scene was happening. But even in San Francisco, where they were, all the weirdos of the world came out to San Francisco then. They heard about this fantastic scene. And weird people, and bad people, and drug people, and it all fell apart very fast. And then everybody started trying to find new ways to still live in a better way, a higher consciousness way. The new age just started coming in, and you guys all kind of accept it, you're used to it. But at that time, everything had been very straight, and suddenly these conscious peoples had ideas of how to live life on a higher level, to try to open your mind and do yoga and meditation, and they had all kind of trainings and lectures and really interesting stuff going on. And I know I'm supposed to talk about the trance world, but I have to tell you one funny story because I might have an half alien baby. I know you're shocked by that, but listen to this story. I'm traveling. I'm in the Philippines, and I went to Hawaii for the summertime, and I got to Maui, and they were having a week-long New Age convention. I had never even heard what is the New Age. Well, it's new ways of thinking and new ways of trying to live life on a higher level. So they had a whole week of lectures and meditations, and going up to Haleakala volcano for sunrise, and then to the sacred places of the local Hawaiians, and it was fascinating. I was really fascinated by it. And they had all these trainings where you tried doing all different things that you had never done before, that maybe even you were nervous about or resistant to, but it was very interesting things going on. So while we were there in Maui, it was the end of that New Age week. And this one woman there, her name was Valerie, and she said, I want a whole bunch of you to come down, and on the one end of the island is the hippie end of the island. And these two lesbian women who were at the New Age thing had a beautiful house there, and they said, let's all go down there. You can all stay at my house. So we went down there, and this Valerie was working every day, and she said, I am connected with aliens. I am a channel. I get information through me, and I write it down, and she had giant notebooks of all this channeled information. And she said, I've got these major projects going on, which she did, and it was very impressive what she was doing, and Shirley MacLaine was working with her, and it was quite an amazing story. And she said, look, you're coming to California after this. Come visit me, and I'll show you more about the California New Age scene, which is really fascinating and far out. So I went down to San Diego where she was living, and she had one room this big that was floor to ceiling. Manuscripts had been translated of all channeled information of all different kinds. And I mean, it's pretty, is it true? I don't know, but it's pretty amazing to see all that. She said she was a channel, and she had connections in Washington and banking and Hollywood. I mean, she was really connected, and these were big projects she was working on. Very impressive. So in Hawaii, she and I had slept together. And then when I got to San Diego, we continued that week to sleep together. On Friday night, she said, wow, I'm really exhausted. It was very tiring, this channeling thing. It takes a lot of energy out of you. She said, let's go to the disco. And she had had a surfer boyfriend before that. And the aliens had told her to get rid of that guy. He was a dope smoker and a ne'er-do-well, and he was never going to be any good for the projects they wanted her to work on. So she had broken up with him. And here I am sleeping with her. We get there Friday night. She sees this guy. They rush into each other's arms, kissing all over. And she says, look, I really still love this guy. I want to go home with him. So I said, okay. And she went off. Well, 9 months later, she had a baby. But I forgot to mention that during the summer, while I was still in Hawaii, she said the aliens came and took her out in the desert near San Diego and performed an operation on her, and they put some implant behind her ear and in her brain so that she could understand higher math and business economics and all these things to help her with these projects. And they changed her name from Valerie to Lyra. This is what she told me, and I'm just telling you. So 9 months later, she had a baby, and we're wondering, is it my baby or that surfer's baby? And if she is an alien now, she said, oh, there's a word called a walk-in, where an alien spirit walks into a human body. You don't know it, but there is an alien living inside, and they say that many of us are walk-ins. I don't know. She said she was a walk-in now. She was an alien. So she had a baby, and maybe it was my baby, so I might have and half-alien baby, I don't know. Then I got with my Israeli wife, my girlfriend. She also came in 1990 to Goa when Raja Ram did. And that year, she had gotten this scam ticket that they sold in Pune. The Indians are up to all kind of tricks, and for $2,400, you could get a round-the-world business class ticket good for 1 year. And a friend of hers had given that as a present, and she had only flown from Amsterdam to Goa and had the rest of the world to go. We fell in love, which is another weird story. I could tell you some stories about that because I already had another girlfriend. It was a little difficult. But off we went traveling, and then we got to Hawaii, and I had told her this whole story about Lyra and the baby and everything, and she, oh yeah, right, yeah. I mean, we all would think, haha. So I said, let's see if we can find her, and sure enough, we dug her up, we found her, and she had this very fancy office, and she was really a big business person now, doing all this stuff. And she said, I have 1 hour, I'm really busy, but come in. And she talked to us for 1 hour, and we didn't hardly say anything. And she just told us about all this stuff Shirley MacLaine was working on, an alien coming invasion, and so many things. And we're just like mind blown. And we walked out of there, and not my ex, she said, what was that? Maybe you do have an alien baby. I don't know, but that was really weird and really interesting. So anyway, yeah, she came to Goa, and through the 90s, well, in 1989, finally America said to India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Burma, Thailand, the five big drug countries over there, we will give you millions of dollars in aid, but you have to enact and enforce strong drug laws. We're trying to stop the war on drugs was starting. So they all said yes, and then India suddenly had drug laws, and we couldn't do those mad parties. And by the way, I'll tell you, in those 80s, when it was still legal, there used to be really crazy parties with acid punches. And one of the famous characters was a guy named Mescaline Bobby, who brought a lot of mescaline every year there. And he always had a big mad birthday party each year. So at one party, his daughter, who was 19 and living next door to me, Lisa, you could rent these. It was like a fairy, kind of a little fairy castle that they made puppet shows and stuff out of. But it was all sparkling lights and a super trippy thing. And then so she dressed up as a fairy and an angel, and she was there and had this big pot. Acid Eric had made this huge punch, and everybody was queued up. You know, it was just a line. You didn't have to worry about it. And one by one, everybody came and got the acid. It was quite amazing. So there were a lot of these punch parties that were pretty incredible. And another funny story that happened is at another one of Mescal and Bobby's birthday parties, we decided to have an acid punch, and I was part of the gang and the friends. And my Indian cleaning woman worked all day grating coconuts to make coconut milk, and then we put in pineapple juice and made pina colada acid punch. So we had this giant barrel full of all this coconut milk and pina colada mix, and we put in the acid and stirred it up, and everybody was taking and having a great time. It was a wild, crazy party. About 3 in the morning, people start coming in. Oh, we want more. So we said, well, the first batch is gone, all right. So we've got the second barrel there of all this. Pour in the acid. I stir it all up, and then I started handing it out. But in the heat and humidity of Goa, the coconut milk had gone off. And it was really slimy and awful tasting, but everybody wanted to get high on the acid, so people are forcing this stuff like, but the party went on, and it was a great party. So there were many mad scenes like that going on, really wild times. And, well, let's go to 1,200 micrograms then. The first album took off, the Drugs album. We thought, well, maybe we should do some more. And then we started getting bookings all over people, because there were some bands through the 90s who made unique music that nobody else made music quite like them. Hallucinogen, Simon Posford is the king of that. Nobody ever made music like. And he today, now 25 years later, still plays sets for very big money of his 90s music. And he has tried since then, I'm a good friend with him, to make that music again. Somehow he lost the magic touch, but that music was so special, those first 2 albums, that today, 25 years later, he gets huge money to play those same tracks all over the world. He plays the same music, but people love it, and I see it work time after time, you know. So there was Extreme, who's still playing today. There was Etnica, early GMS, Total Eclipse, Blue Nuns, Green Nuns of the Revolution, yeah, right, who all had very special, unique sounds. And almost all of them, Astral Projection's another one, they're all still playing today. They live on mostly through their fame from those great years was incredible music. And then it got to be around 2000. Asterix came in. He was another one, had his own unique sound. And Infected Mushroom, if you remember their early work, was killer trance music. They switched into something more commercial for years now, but they were great. And Scuzzy was another one. Scuzzy, Mad Scuzzy, yeah. So all of these bands, and then 1200 Micrograms, I think, is one of those also. When we put out our first album, it was different music than anybody else made. And GMS and us, the combination of the four, we did something different. People seem to really like it. And I'm happy to say that till today, people come up to me, even here and all over the world, and say, we didn't know about trance music, and people said, come listen to this band, 1200 Micrograms. We said, oh, now I understand. Wow, this is far out. And they say, one kid told me the other day in Israel, I was just playing in Israel the other day, and he said, I started listening to 1200 mics when I was 8 years old. And I said, well, come on, give me a break. He said, I promise you, my brother was playing it, and I got right into it. And I said, well, you're the king. That's the earliest I heard anybody. But many people said 12, 13, they started taking drugs and got into the music. And they said, I talked about the soundtrack of our lives. Each of us has, and they said that 1200 mics and Spango, by the way, and carbon-based life forms are part of most of our soundtrack of our lives. So people say to me all the time, yeah, all through our teen years, you were with us and special experiences we had. And one couple came up to me and said, you know, we have a 4-year-old daughter now, and we want to tell you a secret. We made that daughter fucking to 1200 mics music. And we just had to tell you that she's 4 now, and thank you very much because, yeah, so there are many classic stories, people telling us things that happened, you know, important part of their lives, memorable, meaningful things that happened, and 1200 Mics was playing. I was playing in a festival in Germany, and most of the festivals in Germany are up in what used to be East Germany, communist Germany. And now even the Antares and the Vuven, they're all up in this area. So this was more east even, this particular festival. And one guy came up to me and he said, you know, we are taxi drivers. There's 5 of us taxi drivers, and we live east. He said it's a different world over there, and it is. They're really different Germans over there and a different story, but they also love 1200 mics and trance music. And he said, you know, we are 1200 mics fanatics. And he said, I made a mix myself of all of your music, and I put it on a tape, and I've listened to nothing but 1200 mics for 3 months, wherever I'm in my car and in the ambulance. And he said, our favorite time is when we have an emergency, then we put on the lights and the siren, and we put on mescaline. Come on now, let's all take, and here we go, let's go to the emergency. So there are lots of funny stories like that, people telling, and it's such a pleasure for us to make this music and to see the smiling faces. I was just watching Raj over there with Spangle, and just it's a sea of smiles. And also at Carbon-Based Life Forms last night, I mean, people were crying there and touching music, deeply meaningful. Somehow music, of all of our 5 senses, our ears are the most important because we have music through our ears, and it's a deep part of all of our lives, something really special and meaningful to us. So I was watching that, and it's a thrill for us to have made this music and then to DJ it and see everybody getting high and happy on the, yes, on drugs, but also, many people aren't, but just on the music and the dancing. There's no high quite like that high of everybody dancing together to music that you really love, whichever music it is. But a group of people into a certain music, like Carbon-Based last night, it's very slow music, but people are out there dancing, slowly moving and feeling it and crying. And so for us, too, we see people getting really high on the music, and they come up and say great things. And what a thrill for us to be able to do that. That is our feeling. And one thing I'll just say that we try to do is there's a new style of full-on trance music that the Nano Boys are doing now, and that's Tristan and Avalon and Laughing Buddha and Dixter and this whole gang. And it's very good music, and it's really dancey music. All those guys know how to make a good, it's called the bottom when you have the kick drum and the bass and the percussion. And if you just get a good percussion going, Erez from Infected Mushroom said to me many years ago, he said, you know, for most people, the average people, all they need is a good groove, a good bottom, and they feel like dancing, and that's all you need. And you don't need too much in the middle of the top, although Infected has always had very interesting middle and tops too. But the new stripped down nano way is there's no more music in these tracks. It's mostly psychedelic sound effects. You hear all these, it's very kicking and dancing. Makes you want to dance, makes you feel like dancing. It's fun, but not too much. There's no music, and they have little bits of music, but mostly it's sound effects and little bits of music. And it's people love it. It's going great. But for many of us, and for us at 1200 mics, we like to have special mids and highs and music in it. We have musical development in each of our tracks, and we think and hope that that takes people flying in a special way, and it touches your heart and your spirit, and people take off, and many people tell us they do, that that happens for them. So we have a technique in 1200 mics that we call layering music, and we sit almost all of our tracks we've made in 2 days, which is pretty surprising. But the first day we sit together, we get the idea of what we want to do. Rick Tom sits at the computer and makes some what we call sequences, the actual musical sounds, but not the sounds, but the sequence. And then Roger Ram gets on the synthesizers, and we listen to 1,000 sounds, and we say, "Yeah, keep that one." And then we develop a bank of sounds and sequences that we have that we call our ammunition. And the next night we take the acid, and then we put it all together, and somehow it's worked pretty good. And so we have this technique of layering where we get something going, something that we think is cool, and then that goes for a little while, and then we add another layer playing along with that. And then we might add a third layer playing along with those two, and then the third layer will become the first layer. And we're doing that, and it seems to work quite well. So that's what we're trying to do. And we are the love generation, and we believe in spreading love. It sounds a little trite to use that word, but it is what we're feeling. All of us want to experience closeness, the bond of trance music, the bond of dancing together. And we are trying to encourage that sort of love and happiness vibe. And we are happy when we see all these people smiling on the dance floor, as I hope we see tonight. I think we will. Uh, so that's our mission, and it's worked pretty well so far. And we continue. Roger's 70. Now we're 16 years doing it. Many of the kids here. I'm also thrilled to see that there is a whole new trance generation. You look around here, there's loads of 17 to 22-year-olds who were little kids when we got started, but they also grew up with 1200 mics music. And they really are blasting now, and we need that. We need a whole new young generation who love this music, who are powering to this music, who are blasting. So that's great to see. We love that. Now, does anyone have any question at this point? 10 more minutes. What? Repeat what? I didn't hear any question, did you? Okay. Yeah. The question is, in '83, there was two first electronic tracks. What were they? And it's pretty interesting because many of you may know the name Sven Väth, Cocoon Club. It's techno music. Anybody hear of Sven Väth ever? A few, not many. Anyway, by the way, in the '80s, we called our music techno music. For 10 years, we called it techno music because it was made with technology. And then, well, I'll go back to '83. There were two tracks, and the first one was called Electrical Salsa, and it had this like black Caribbean guy going, Electrical Salsa, uh-huh, uh-huh. Bye, 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 bye. And it was really cool music, and everybody loved it, and it was made by Sven Väth. And he actually then came to Goa. We used to hang out, and he was in trance. He was in psy-trance in the late 80s and early 90s, and used to DJ that music in Goa and back in Europe, took it back to Germany. And then he started a whole new thing in, I think, 92 called techno music, a much more stripped down, more minimalized, slower, a different story that is super popular today. And in Ibiza, where I live, you probably all heard of the famous club scene. And all these 5 huge clubs have a different promoter and night every night. And every Monday for years, he has the Cocoon Club, which he started in Frankfurt, became super huge. They went to the Love Parade in Berlin and had a giant truck with the techno, and everybody fell in love with it. And then he came to Ibiza, and the rest is history. So anyway, we had to change. All right, what are we going to call our music now? We can't call it techno anymore. So it started to be Goa trance. You go into trance when you dance with this music. That's one of the concepts. Some people do, some people don't. But probably each of us have had some times where you closed your eyes and you may have taken something, and that music gets in you, and you do go into some kind of trance. You go into a special other place than you haven't been before. And this is one of the things that we love about this music and these festivals, is that it's so international. We have people, I think there are over 100 countries, and at the Boom they said over 150 countries, people came from all over the world to experience this kind of thing. Interestingly, also in Goa, through the 80s, we were doing it. It started in Goa, but there's a monsoon season. It gets super hot in May, and June the rains start, and everybody runs away to Bali or Ibiza or wherever, your home country. So everybody took this music back around the world with them and started these little parties, these little trance techno parties. And it just grew and grew. And for the first 10 years, everything was free. All the parties were free, no DJs, no money, just for the love of the music and the dancing. And in the 80s in Goa and Ibiza, people decorated incredibly. They would get teams of friends together, and they would go, and for 3 days they would paint all the palm trees with black light colors. And one funny story is, so they decorated really fantastic decorations in jungle areas and at the beach, and it was really trippy, and then everybody tripping. And one time they used to have these powders that were a dye that you could paint things with, and then they would be active with the black light. So there was this black light up there, and this swarm of bees came around, and were hovering around the black light. And somebody took a handful of that yellow powder, and they went like that on the bees. And then suddenly these bees started flying all around the place, all psychedelic, lit up, and everyone's going, whoa! It's a classic. Yeah, there are many funny stories. One time they have in India what are called fire ants, these big, giant red and green ants, and they bite you, it really burns. Believe me, I've been bitten. So we were at a jungle party in what was called the bamboo forest, this bamboo grove all around and jungly all around. It's tropical in Goa. And the music is blasting and everybody's tripping, and I'm standing right by the edge of the dance floor, and then the forest, the jungle is right there, and this girl comes running out screaming. And she had gone in, and these fire ants, they take these giant leaves, huge leaves as big as my hand, and they bend them around and make like a nest in there, and there's thousands of them in this nest. And the girl had walked in, and she had dreadlocks, and she bumped that nest with her hair, and they went all down her blouse and her hair and everything. She came screaming out. She's being bitten. I mean, one bite really stings. And they're all over. And her poor boyfriend is, oh, my God. Everybody's trying to help her. The music is blasting and the lights are flashing. And whoa. Yeah, and off they went. They ran away. I don't know what happened to her, but it was... Yeah, there were many funny stories. One time, Acid Eric, who was a real character, an American guy who looked just like Santa Claus. He was a little fat guy with a long white beard and long white hair, and he dressed in all the Space Tribe clothing. One time I was in Thailand after Goa, and I'm walking down this beach, and I see this clothesline, and it's all this unbelievable psychedelic wear up there hanging on the washing line. I said, Acid Eric has to be here. And sure enough, that was his wash line. You couldn't miss it. So he made these punches all the time and brought acid every year. It was a pretty amazing phenomenon. But one of our friends had an acid party at his house and asked Eric to make the punch. And he had heard someone say that this guy making the party had complained to people that his punches weren't strong enough. He's a wimp, said Eric. So this is a horrible thing that he did, but he decided, all right, I'm going to fuck you. I'm going to teach you a lesson. And he made a especially strong acid and told everybody it was a mild acid. So we all took too much, and it was an unbelievable house party, really fun and really crazy. One couple had just arrived in Goa their first day, and nobody told them it was an acid punch. They thought they were having some punch, so they took 3 cups. And then, oh my God, and they took their clothes off and they started making out on the floor and they wanted to do it. We're going, I mean, it is a wild place, Goa, but this is a little. And at 3 in the morning, Jerry, the guy whose house it was, said, "This is too crazy. Enough. Out. Everybody out. Finish party." You know. So what are you talking about? It's way too strong, this acid. Nobody can even see straight. And you're sending. And it was completely dark outside in the jungle out there. And all these people tripping, so stumbling out into the black. You know, what do we do now? I was also paralyzed. I had way too much. I was with Roger Ram. Luckily, he had taken his own acid. For some reason, he brought out his own, so he could help me home. My girlfriend was there, a few friends, and they took me by the arms and like goose marched me over to Roger Ram's house, and I had to sit behind a coconut tree for about 2 hours. I couldn't talk. I was paralyzed. I was going, whoa. So these kind of crazy things were going on all the time. And then in 1989, it still continues today, very druggy there. And a lot of people take acid, but you can't do it publicly like that. And the crazy things. So we're just about out of time. Any last question? Who's next? Where's the next speaker? I don't know. You are? Well, that's a little bit about my experience. 1,200 mics has been a really fun trip for me. At 70 years old, I'm pinching myself all the time. Is this really still happening to me? Am I DJing in places like this and all around the world and making people happy? And what a life. I mean, I get to live in Goa and I live in Visa and they pay me to travel all over. And it's quite amazing. And 1,200 mics, as I say, has touched a lot of people all over the world. You know, the trance story is still underground. If you ask most people, have you heard of psychedelic trance music? They haven't. Have you ever heard that music? They haven't. If they hear it, most of them hate it. Turn that shit down. They can't stand it. It's too fast, it's too intense, and we cannot explain our taste. How do we explain our taste? But somehow, for us, there's no other music that gets us high in the same way as trance does, and what a buzz. And I started to say it's so international. You know, people from all over the world and people who have a lot of money and people who don't have money and different races and everything, we all come together with the feeling of we want to dance, we want to have fun, and there's a bonding among all of us that's very special. And these, I fantastically love these festivals because life in general is stressy for everybody. The world is fucked up and getting more and more spinning out of control, as we all know all the time. Life is more and more difficult. And suddenly, for a few days, you can come to these festivals and jump out of normal reality into a totally alternate reality, which this is. It's not normal reality at all. It's a fantasy land, a fantasy world, and we call it a psychedelic Disneyland for adults. Think about it. It's like Disneyland for adults where we can party, take drugs, dance, have a crazy time, and wow, and away from all that normal reality. You have to go back to work next week or whatever, but for these few days, you're in a special place with a lot of special people. You might never connect with them in other ways, but at the parties, you connect with people all over the place in all different ways, in very special ways, in very deep ways and meaningful ways. And my son is, excuse me, I got to finish. My son is 20 years old. He grew up with 1,200 mics, and at about 15, he got into the music, and he came to the Ozora when he was 16 with his girlfriend. and me and Roger Ram and a whole bunch of people, and we took acid together for his first time, and they loved it. And started doing, and then went to the next. We went to 2 more Ozoras. We've been to 3 Ozoras, and for his senior high school project, he did a video on the trance scene, and he was at Ozora. He had film footage from Ozora, from Ibiza, from clubs, and then he interviewed Aja, Rajaram, me, Billy Cosmosis, and many others, and he put together this thing, which is on YouTube. I can't think of the name right now. But it was very interesting, and one of the things that I said in that is that this music, some people say that these parties and this music is frivolous, it's not meaningful, and we have a joke and we say, no, it's not a matter of life and death. It's much more important than that. Anyway, what I was saying is that a lot of times you just are having fun on the dance floor, but I think each of us have had special experiences, and particularly on LSD, which fires your brain in new chemical ways, and you think and experience, and your senses come alive in new ways like they never were before, and you hear music in different ways. And I go out when I'm tripping on the dance floor, and I hear our music, and I hear stuff in our music. It's what? I didn't even realize we had those simple, subtle things that are in there. So sometimes you close your eyes. I remember we used to cry like people were crying last night at Carbon Base. It's so, I'm welling at the speaker, it was so powerful for us, and sharing with the friends. I'm sorry. What was I saying? Anyway, I have to finish now. Come on, guys. Who's next? Because it's time. I don't want to take their time. Thank you very much, everybody. I hope you enjoyed it. Fun to hear. It's been an amazing adventure. It's a killer scene. This is our tribe. We are all from the Psy tribe. And thank you, thank you, thank you. Nice one. Enjoy, everybody. Soundtrack of our lives. Have fun.